Imagine your kids playing outside on a nice sunny day, laughing, riding their bikes, just being kids. Sounds normal, right? Not if HOA Karen has anything to say about it. Because according to her, children having fun is a crime. One day, my kids were playing outside like they always do, and suddenly the cops showed up at my door. Why? Because Karen called them. She claimed my kids were disturbing the peace, as if a couple of kids on bikes were some kind of public menace. But here's the thing about Karen, she messed with the wrong parent. So I did what any good dad would do. I got my revenge. And trust me, by the time I was done, Karen regretted ever dialing 911. Before we dive into this wild story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Taleflow, and drop a comment if you've ever had to deal with a nightmare to a Karen. It started off as a normal Saturday afternoon. The sun was out, the neighborhood was quiet, and my kids were riding their bikes up and down the sidewalk, laughing and having fun. Nothing out of the ordinary, at least to any sane person. But of course, HOA Karen wasn't a sane person. Karen had been on a power trip ever since she got elected to the HOA board. She treated the entire neighborhood like her personal kingdom, handing out petty fines, making up ridiculous rules, and sticking her nose where it didn't belong. And today she set her sights on my kids. I was in my driveway, cleaning out the garage, when I heard that voice. You know, the one high-pitched, condescending, and dripping with entitlement. I turned around, and there was Karen, standing at the edge of my yard, arms crossed, lips pressed so tight they looked like they were about to disappear. You need to control your children, she snapped. They're being disruptive. I looked over. My kids were just riding their bikes and laughing. Karen, I said, raising an eyebrow. They're just playing. She scoffed. This is a quiet neighborhood. We have rules about excessive noise. I almost laughed. Noise? They weren't blasting music. They weren't screaming. They were just being kids. They're fine, Karen, I said, turning back to my garage. Have a nice day. I thought that was the end of it. I was so wrong. Not even 20 minutes later, I hear sirens. I step outside, and sure enough, there's a police car pulling up in front of my house. And who's standing on the sidewalk, looking smug as hell? Karen. Two officers step out, looking as confused as I am. Sir, one of them says, we got a call about a disturbance. I blank. A disturbance? Karen nodded dramatically. Yes, these children have been screaming and causing chaos for hours. I was just trying to relax, but they're out here terrorizing the neighborhood. I stare at her. Then I stare at the cops. My kids are just standing there, looking confused. One of the officers sighs, rubbing his forehead. Even he knows this is stupid. I need to check things out, he says. I nod. Be my guest. One of the officers walks around, looking at my yard, the sidewalk, and my kids, who are now awkwardly standing there, unsure what to do. After a few minutes, he turns back to Karen. Ma'am, he says, we're not seeing any issue here. Karen's face twists in frustration. But they were loud. They were making a racket. The officer shrugs. Kids playing outside isn't a crime. Karen isn't having it. You don't understand. This is a quiet neighborhood. We have rules. The second officer looks at me. Sir, are you part of an HOA? I nod. Yeah, unfortunately. He sighs. Figures. Then he turns to Karen. Ma'am, this isn't a police matter. If you have an issue with noise, you need to take it up with the HOA board, not 911. Karen's face turns bright red. But the officer isn't done. Actually, he adds, filing false police reports is a crime. If you call us again for something like this, you could face charges. Karen opens her mouth, closes it, opens it again. She looks like she's about to explode. Then, without another word, she spins on her heel and storms off. The cops apologize for the trouble and leave. And me? I stand there, watching Karen stomp away like a child throwing a tantrum. I should have been happy it was over. But I wasn't. Because at that moment, I knew one thing for sure. Karen wasn't going to stop. And if she wanted a battle, I was more than ready to give her one. Karen thought she could bully me into submission by calling the cops. Big mistake. If she wanted to play the rules game, then fine, I'd play. But unlike Karen, I wasn't going to make up fake rules. I was going to use the real ones and turn them against her. That night, I pulled out the HOA rulebook, the same boring 50-page document they handed out when I moved in. Most people never actually read it, but I did. And it didn't take long to find exactly what I needed. I skimmed through the noise ordinances, expecting to see something Karen could twist to her advantage. But to my surprise, there's nothing about kids playing outside. The only rule about disturbances was for excessive noise between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. But guess what? My kids were playing at 2 in the afternoon. Karen had no case. But then I found something even better. While flipping through the rulebook, I came across a section about nuisance complaints. It stated that if a homeowner repeatedly files complaints that are deemed invalid, they could face fines, disciplinary action, and even removal from the HOA board. I smirked, because Karen? She had a long history of filing complaints against people. She once reported a neighbor's garden gnome for being too tacky. She fined a guy $50 for having a basketball hoop in his driveway. She even sent a warning letter to a woman whose wind chimes were too loud. And now, she had called the cops on kids playing outside. I knew that if I wanted to take Karen down, I needed proof. So over the next few days, I started talking to my neighbors. And let me tell you, everyone had a Karen story. She fined me for my lawn being too green, one guy said. She told my daughter her sidewalk chalk was graffiti. Another neighbor ranted. She literally measured my grass with a ruler once, someone else added. I collected every complaint, every fine, every ridiculous violation notice Karen had ever issued. And then I brought it straight to the HOA board. The next HOA meeting was packed. Word had spread that Karen had called the cops on my kids, and people were fed up. The HOA president, Mr. Callahan, started the meeting like normal, until I stood up. I have a serious concern, I said, holding up the HOA rulebook. Karen has been abusing her position to harass residents and issue invalid complaints. Karen's head snapped toward me. "Excuse me," she shrieked. I ignored her and continued. I laid out everything, the fake fines, the ridiculous complaints, and of course the 911 call about my kids. Then I read aloud the HOA's rule about nuisance complaints. According to our bylaws, I said, Karen has violated HOA policy multiple times and should be subject to disciplinary action. Karen turned bright red. That's not true. I was just enforcing the rules. Mr. Callahan frowned. Karen, is it true you called the police over kids riding their bikes? They were disruptive, she sputtered. The entire room groaned. Then, one by one, neighbors started speaking up. Karen fined me for a flag on my porch. She reported my kid's lemonade stand as an unlicensed business. She told my husband his truck was too big for the driveway. Karen was sinking fast. And then Mr. Callahan delivered the final blow. Karen, he said, we've had multiple complaints about you abusing your authority. As of today, you are officially under review for removal from the HOA board. Karen gasped. You can't do that, she shrieked. I'm the only one keeping order in this neighborhood. Mr. Callahan shook his head. No, Karen, you're the one causing the problems. The room erupted in applause. Karen stormed out, slamming the door behind her. And me? I just sat back and smiled. Because this wasn't over yet. Karen wasn't just getting removed. She was about to face one last punishment. And trust me, she never saw it coming. After the HOA board announced that Karen was under review for removal, you'd think she would have laid low, maybe try to clean up her act and avoid making things worse. But no. Karen did what all entitled people do when they start losing power. She doubled down. And that was her biggest mistake yet. The day after the HOA meeting, Karen went on a rampage. Since she wasn't officially removed yet, she still had some authority left. And she decided to abuse every last second of it. By noon, she had sent out 3 more violation notices for improper trash can placement, 1 fine for a poorly maintained lawn. It was literally perfect. And the best one, a warning letter for my kids' chalk drawings, calling them unauthorized artwork. Chalk drawings. On a sidewalk. That washes away with rain. I was done. Karen wanted to act like a dictator until the very last second. Fine. I make sure she got kicked out for good. A week later, the official removal vote took place. Karen showed up, still convinced she could talk her way out of it. She sat at the front, arms crossed, glaring at everyone like we were the problem. Mr. Callahan, the HOA president, cleared his throat. All right, we're here to finalize the removal vote for Karen, based on abuse of power, excessive complaints, and inappropriate use of HOA resources. Karen shot up from her chair. This is a witch hunt, she shrieked. The room groaned. She pointed at me. He started all of this. His kids are a nuisance. This whole neighborhood is turning into chaos without me keeping order. Mr. Callahan held up a stack of written complaints. Karen, we have 23 formal complaints against you, including a 911 call over children playing outside. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Karen's face twitched. She looked around the room, realizing she had no allies left. And then she snapped. Karen let out a full-on scream, like a cartoon villain losing at the end of the movie type of scream. She grabbed her notebook and flung it across the room. You're all going to regret this, she shrieked. Then she did the pettiest thing possible. She stormed over to the light switch and shut off the power to the meeting room. In the middle of her own removal vote, everyone just sat there in the dark in stunned silence. Then Mr. Callahan sighed and turned on his phone flashlight. Well, he said, that just made this decision a whole lot easier. Lights or no lights, the vote went forward. 19-0. Unanimous. Karen was officially removed from the HOA board. When the lights came back on, she was already gone. And by the next morning, a for sale sign was in her yard. With Karen finally out, the HOA actually started making improvements instead of harassing people. No more fake fines. No more stupid complaints. No more dictatorship. And my kids, they're still riding their bikes and playing outside. Because at the end of the day, Karen lost. And the neighborhood won. You think after getting humiliated, kicked off the HOA board, and basically running herself out of town, Karen would just leave quietly. But no. Karen just had to get in one last shot before she disappeared forever. A few days after Karen stormed out of the meeting, an anonymous email went out to the entire HOA. The subject line, the truth about my removal. I almost didn't open it, but I'm glad I did, because it was the funniest thing I had ever read. Dear residents, it is with great sadness that I inform you of my departure from this once beautiful neighborhood. For years, I have dedicated myself to maintaining order, but due to a coordinated smear campaign against me, I have been unjustly removed from my position. I tried to enforce the rules fairly, but some people, who will remain unnamed, would rather turn this community into a lawless free-for-all. Now, you will all suffer the consequences. Expect property values to drop, crime to rise, and chaos to consume what was once a peaceful neighborhood. Good luck, you're going to need it. Sincerely, Karen. I had to read it twice just to make sure it was real. She actually believed she was the victim. She actually thought she was holding the neighborhood together. And she actually thought we were all going to regret getting rid of her. The group chat exploded. Oh no, whatever will we do without Karen keeping us safe from children on bicycles? She really thinks she was the hero in this story, huh? Should we build a statue in her honor? Maybe a park bench dedicated to Karen's complaints? One guy printed the email and framed it in his garage. Another made t-shirts that said Lawless Free-for-All 2024 with a picture of a kid on a bike. And Mr. Callahan, the HOA president, simply responded to the email with, "We wish you the best, Karen." Truly. A week later, the for sale sign in Karen's yard was replaced with a sold sign. And just like that, Karen was gone. No dramatic exit. No more tantrums. Just gone. Without Karen micromanaging the entire neighborhood, things actually improved. The HOA stopped issuing pointless fines. The community actually focused on real issues, fixing sidewalks, updating the pool, and adding streetlights. And most importantly, my kids are still playing outside. And guess what? The world didn't end. Property values didn't drop. Crime didn't rise. Turns out, getting rid of Karen was the best thing that ever happened to our HOA. With Karen finally gone, the neighborhood entered what I can only describe as a golden era of peace. No more random fines. No more petty complaints. No more HOA dictatorship. It was glorious. For the first time in years, the HOA actually started doing its job properly. Instead of spending time harassing people over lawn decorations and sidewalk chalk, the new board actually focused on real improvements. The community pool got a much-needed upgrade. The streetlights that had been flickering for months finally fixed. And the best part, the HOA lowered fines for minor infractions instead of weaponizing them against homeowners. Imagine that, an HOA that actually works for the people instead of against them. Even though Karen was gone, she still lived on in legend. The HOA group chat quickly became a meme factory, with people joking about how the neighborhood was descending into chaos without Karen's leadership. Some of my favorite moments. Just saw 2 kids riding bikes. Guess it's all over for this neighborhood. RIP property values. A dog barked once today. Should we call the cops? Thinking of putting up a pink flamingo on my lawn in her honor. Someone even threw a lawless free-for-all barbecue at the park, where people brought sidewalk chalk, basketballs, and radios blasting, "We are the champions." It was beautiful. About 2 months later, I was at the grocery store when I spotted her. Karen, standing in the checkout line, looking as miserable as ever. She saw me. I saw her. And you know what she did? She rolled her eyes and turned away. Because at the end of the day, she lost. She had all the power, and she threw it all away. And now, she was just another ex-HOA dictator with nowhere left to rule. Looking back, this entire insane situation taught me a few things. Some people just can't handle power. The moment Karen got control, she turned into a tyrant, and it cost her everything. Know the HOA rules, because some Karens will try to make up their own. If I hadn't checked the bylaws, Karen would have kept abusing the system. Always know your rights. The best revenge is exposing a Karen in front of everyone. Once the entire neighborhood saw the truth, Karen crumbled. There's no coming back from that. Neighborhoods are way better without HOAs run by power-hungry Karens. Ever since Karen left, the HOA has been normal. And honestly, that's all anyone wanted. Karen thought she could control everything. She thought she could call the cops on kids playing, fine people into submission, and run the HOA like a dictatorship. But in the end, she lost her power, her reputation, and even her home. And the neighborhood thrived without her. Because at the end of the day, Karen was the real nuisance all along. And that, my friends, is how Karen's reign of terror came to an end. What do you think? Have you ever dealt with an HOA Karen who took things way too far? Or a neighbor who thought they ran the whole street? Share your wildest HOA or neighborhood horror stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video to keep HOA Karens away. Subscribe to Taleflow for more crazy HOA and revenge stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss another Karen takedown. Thanks for watching, and remember, if an HOA Karen starts causing trouble, the best way to stop them is to know the rules and use them against them. See you in the next one.